Have you ever trusted the one person who shares your DNA, only to realize they orchestrated your absolute ruin for social media clout? Carolyn walked into a 5-star restaurant, hoping for genuine romance, completely unaware her identical twin sister had set up a humiliating blind date to broadcast to millions of followers. But her cruel sister failed to account for the quiet, lethal man sitting at the adjacent table. A Mafia boss didn't just stop the joke. He violently rewrote the punchline. Rain lashed against the foggy window pane of Carolyn Abernathy's modest downtown apartment, blurring the neon streetlights into streaks of electric blue and crimson. She stood before her full-length mirror, her hands trembling as she smoothed the fabric of her emerald-green wrap dress. At 260 pounds, Carolyn had spent most of her 26 years navigating a world that constantly reminded her she took up too much space. Society had conditioned her to apologize for her body, to hide in oversized sweaters and dark, receding colors. But tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight, she wanted to be seen. Her identical twin sister, Cleo, had convinced her to take a chance. Genetically, they were a medical anomaly. While they shared the same bone structure, the same striking hazel eyes, and the same rich chestnut hair. That was where the similarities abruptly ended. Cleo was a size 2, a fiercely ambitious lifestyle influencer with over 3 million followers on Instagram. Cleo lived her life in curated filters, designer sponsorships, and absolute vanity. Carolyn, on the other hand, battled severe polycystic ovary syndrome, working as a quiet, dedicated accountant for a local logistics firm. For years, Cleo had treated Carolyn like a tragic charity case at best, and a convenient stepping stone at worst. Yet earlier that week, Cleo had called with an unusually sweet tone, promising she had met the perfect man for her sister. "He's tired of superficial city girls, Cleo had purred through the phone line. "His name is Jason. He's a junior partner at a hedge fund, and he explicitly told me he loves women with curves. Just go. Let yourself be happy for once." Carolyn desperately wanted to believe her. Deep down, beneath the layers of self-doubt, she craved companionship. She applied a bold red lipstick, took a deep, shuddering breath, and grabbed her umbrella. 30 minutes later, the taxi pulled up to Laura, one of the most exclusive and notoriously pretentious restaurants in the city's financial district. The moment Carolyn stepped through the heavy revolving doors, the atmosphere shifted. The dining room was a sea of crystal chandeliers, velvet booths, and patrons who looked like they stepped out of luxury fashion magazines. As she approached the host stand, the sharply dressed maitre d' swept his gaze over her. The microaggression was subtle, a slight tightening of the lips, a raised brow, but Carolyn felt the familiar sting of silent judgment. "Reservation for Abernathy," Carolyn said, her voice betraying a slight quiver. "Ah, yes. The gentleman is already waiting at table 4. Carolyn navigated through the maze of tables, acutely aware of the space she occupied. Then she saw him. Jason Caldwell was objectively handsome in a sterile, corporate way. He had slicked back blonde hair, a sharp jawline, and an expensive navy suit tailored to perfection. He was nursing a scotch, his thumbs flying across the screen of his smartphone. "Jason?" she asked softly. He looked up, and for a fraction of a second, an unrecognizable expression flashed in his pale blue eyes. It wasn't warmth, it wasn't attraction. It looked frighteningly like predatory amusement. "Carolyn." "Wow, you're exactly as your sister described." He stood up, a performative gesture of chivalry, and gestured for her to sit. "Thank you for doing this," Carolyn said, Sliding into the plush velvet booth, she placed her clutch on the table, trying to calm her racing heart. "Cleo speaks very highly of you." "Cleo is a genius," Jason replied, his lips curling into a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. He casually propped his smartphone against the sleek metallic base of a tabletop wine cooler, the screen facing them. "She really knows how to put on a show." Carolyn frowned, slightly confused by the phrasing, but she brushed it off, eager to make a good impression. "So Cleo mentioned you work in finance?" For the next 20 minutes, the conversation dragged on, punctuated by Jason's bizarre, passive-aggressive remarks. When the waiter arrived to take their order, Carolyn nervously eyed the menu. Before she could speak, Jason intervened. "I'll have the 20-ounce dry-aged ribeye, rare," Jason told the waiter. "And the lady will have the house salad, no croutons, dressing on the side. We're watching our waistlines tonight." Carolyn froze. The blood drained from her face, leaving her flushed with profound embarrassment. The waiter looked incredibly uncomfortable, but nodded and hastily retreated. "Excuse me," Carolyn whispered, her voice tight. "I didn't agree to that." "Come on, Carolyn," Jason chuckled, leaning back in his chair and picking up his drink. "I'm just looking out for you. Your sister said you had a great sense of humor. Don't be so sensitive. Besides, the internet loves a good health journey." "The internet?" Carolyn echoed, her chest tightening with an icy grip of panic. Jason tapped the back of his phone, which was still perfectly angled toward them. "Yeah, smile, babe. You're live on Cleo's private subscriber channel. We're doing a social experiment. It's called Will the Whale Eat the Bait? Currently, 35,000 people are watching." The room seemed to spin. The soft jazz playing through the overhead speakers morphed into a deafening roar in Carolyn's ears. She looked at the phone. The little red light was glowing. Her twin sister, her own flesh and blood, had orchestrated this entire evening just to broadcast her humiliation to an audience of paying subscribers. Cleo had weaponized Carolyn's deepest insecurities for engagement metrics. "You're disgusting," Carolyn breathed out, tears violently stinging the corners of her eyes. She grabbed her clutch and tried to slide out of the booth, but Jason was faster. He reached across the table, his hand clamping down on her wrist with bruising force. "Hold on, the show isn't over. We need the dramatic exit. Let me read some of these comments first." He squinted at the screen. "User hate to see," it says. "Did she actually think a guy like him would want a pig like her?" Oh, and Cleo just pinned a comment. "Your sister says, told you guys she'd fall for it." Carolyn pulled against his grip, a sob tearing from her throat. "Let me go." "Sit down, Shamu," Jason hissed, dropping his charming facade completely, his voice dripping with venom. "You're ruining the framing." What neither Jason nor Carolyn realized was that the cruel spectacle had captured the attention of the man sitting in the secluded corner booth directly behind them. And that man was not someone who tolerated disrespect. Leonardo Leo Moretti did not come to Laura for the dry-aged steak. As the head of the most formidable syndicate operating on the East Coast, Leo used the restaurant's quiet, dimly lit corners to conduct discreet business. At 34, Leo was a terrifyingly handsome man. He possessed sharp, patrician features, dark olive skin, and eyes the color of cold obsidian. Impeccably dressed in a bespoke charcoal three-piece suit, he radiated a quiet, suppressed violence that caused wise men to look away when he walked into a room. He was currently seated across from his underboss, a hulking man named Roberto, discussing a shipment of untaxed imports at the docks. However, for the last 10 minutes, Leo's focus had drifted. His sharp hearing had zeroed in on the table next to theirs. Leo lived by an ancient, unyielding code. He was a man of the shadows, dealing in extortion, smuggling, and leverage. He was no saint, but he harbored a deep, visceral hatred for those who punched down. Bullying the defenseless was a weakness, the mark of a coward. He had watched the woman in the green dress arrive. He noticed the way she nervously adjusted her clothing, recognized the vulnerability in her eyes, and contrary to the shallow societal standards, Leo found her undeniably striking. Her lush curves, her porcelain skin, and her thick, cascading dark hair were beautiful. But it was the gentle, hopeful way she spoke that had caught his attention. Then he heard the man. He heard the order for the salad. He saw the phone propped against the wine cooler. He listened as the arrogant frat boy type dropped the charming act and revealed the live stream. When Jason clamped his hand over Carolyn's wrist and called her a pig, the temperature in Leo's corner of the room seemed to drop below freezing. Roberto, noticing his boss's deadly silence, stopped mid-sentence. "Boss, we have a problem." Leo didn't answer. He slowly unbuttoned his suit jacket, folded his linen napkin, and placed it neatly on the table. "I despise vermin, Roberto," Leo murmured smoothly, "especially loud ones." At table 4, Carolyn was frantically trying to pry Jason's fingers off her arm. The humiliation was an agonizing physical weight crushing her chest. The other patrons in the restaurant were beginning to stare, whispering behind their wine glasses, but no one intervened. They simply watched her drown. "I said sit down," Jason growled, squeezing tighter. "We have to hit 50,000 viewers before I dump you. That was the deal I made with Cleo." Suddenly, a large, deeply tanned hand reached down and gripped Jason's wrist. The grip was not just firm, it was mechanically devastating. Jason gasped, his eyes flying wide open as the pressure instantly ground his bones together. He released Carolyn with a yelp of pain, his head whipping around to glare at the intruder. "What the hell is your problem, man? Let go of me!" Jason spat, though his bravado wavered as he looked up into Leo Moretti's dead black eyes. "You are causing a scene," Leo stated. His voice was not loud. It was a smooth, low baritone, laced with a heavy Italian accent, but it carried the weight of a judge passing an execution order. "I'm filming a stream. Mind your own business." Jason tried to yank his arm back, but Leo's grip only tightened, eliciting a pathetic, high-pitched whimper from the finance bro. Carolyn sat frozen, her hand cradling her bruised wrist. She stared up at the towering man who had materialized out of thin air. He looked like an angel of death wearing a Rolex. Leo ignored Jason struggling. With his free hand, he calmly reached over and picked up the smartphone. He looked at the screen, watching the endless stream of cruel comments scrolling by, fueled by Carolyn's twin sister. Disgust curled the corner of his mouth. "Hey, put that down. That's an expensive—" Leo didn't blink. He effortlessly snapped the smartphone in half with one hand. The sharp crack of the screen, shattering, echoed through the dining room. Sparks fizzled from the broken battery as Leo casually dropped the destroyed pieces of technology into Jason's half-empty glass of scotch. "My phone!" Jason shrieked, his face turning an ugly shade of purple. "Do you know who I am? I'm going to call the cops. I'll sue you for assault." Leo finally released Jason's wrist, violently shoving the man's arm back toward him. He leaned down, placing both palms flat on the white tablecloth, bringing his face mere inches from Jason's. "Call them," Leo whispered softly, a terrifying smile playing on his lips. "Tell them Leonardo Moretti broke your toy. But before you do, understand this. If you ever speak to this woman again, if you ever look in her direction, or if you even breathe the same air as her, I will not break your phone. I will break every finger on your hand, one by one, and feed them to the stray dogs in the alley. Do we have an understanding, little boy?" Jason's face drained of all color. The name Leonardo Moretti carried heavy, terrifying weight in the city. The finance bro swallowed hard, his eyes darting frantically to Roberto, who had quietly stepped up behind Leo, cracking his massive knuckles. I understand," Jason stammered, shrinking into the booth, looking as though he might be sick. "Good. Now get out of my sight before I lose my patience." Jason scrambled out of the booth, didn't bother grabbing his coat, and nearly tripped over a chair as he sprinted toward the restaurant's exit, leaving his shattered phone bubbling in the scotch. Silence reigned over the dining room. Leo slowly stood to his full height, adjusting his cuffs perfectly. He then turned his attention to Carolyn. The terrifying Mafia boss vanished, replaced by a gentleman whose eyes held nothing but profound respect. Carolyn was shaking like a leaf in the wind, tears spilling over her lashes, ruining her carefully applied makeup. She felt raw, exposed, and deeply confused. I don't know what to say," she choked out. "Thank you." Leo reached into his breast pocket, producing a pristine white silk handkerchief, and gently offered it to her. "You do not need to thank me, signorina. A beautiful woman should never be subjected to the company of a swine." He offered his arm to her, bowing his head slightly. "Please allow me to escort you out. The air in here has suddenly become entirely too foul." Carolyn looked at his offered arm. Her heart screamed that this man was dangerous, that she was stepping out of a childish prank and into a world of genuine peril. But as she looked into his dark eyes, she saw something she had never seen from anyone in her life. Absolute, unwavering protection. She placed her hand on his arm, and the Mafia boss escorted her out of the restaurant like she was a queen. The crisp night air hit Carolyn's flushed face the moment they stepped through the glass doors of Laura. The rain had intensified, washing the city streets in a glossy sheen. Before Carolyn could even worry about opening her umbrella, a sleek, matte black Bentley glided silently to the curb. The driver immediately hopped out, popping a large black umbrella and opening the rear passenger door. "Get in," Leo instructed softly, guiding her by the small of her back. His touch was firm, yet surprisingly gentle. I can call a cab," Carolyn protested weakly, though her legs felt like lead. The adrenaline was rapidly leaving her system, threatening to drag her into an abyss of exhaustion and despair. "I do not permit women to take cabs in the rain after they have been crying," Leo replied simply, leaving no room for argument. "Get in. You are safe." Carolyn slid into the cavernous, leather-scented interior of the Bentley. Leo slid in beside her, followed by Roberto, who took the front passenger seat. As the heavy doors shut, sealing out the noise of the city, Carolyn felt entirely isolated in a bubble of immense power and wealth. "Where to, boss?" the driver asked, keeping his eyes firmly ahead. Leo turned to Carolyn. "Where do you live?" Carolyn hesitated. She had just been horrifically betrayed by her own twin. Her trust in humanity was practically non-existent. I live in the West Loop, but honestly, I just want to disappear right now." She buried her face in her hands, a fresh wave of humiliation crashing over her. The reality of what had just happened was sinking in. 35,000 people had watched her. Cleo had set her up. Her sister had laughed at her. Tomorrow, the clips would be everywhere. The internet would immortalize her as the fat, desperate joke who fell for a fake date. "Hey," Leo's voice was a low rumble in the quiet cabin. He didn't touch her, respecting her space, but his presence was commanding. "Look at me." Carolyn slowly lowered her hands, her hazel eyes meeting his dark ones. "You are not a joke," Leo said, reading her mind with frightening accuracy. "The man inside was a coward, and the people watching are faceless cowards who feed on the misery of others to ignore their own hollow lives. Do not give them your tears." "You don't understand," Carolyn whispered, her voice cracking. "It wasn't just some random troll. It was my sister, my identical twin. She set the whole thing up. She has millions of followers. She did this just to prove a point, that I'm the ugly, pathetic half of the Abernathy twins." Leo's eyes darkened, a dangerous shadow passing over his features. "Abernathy? Your sister is Cleo Abernathy?" Carolyn sniffled, nodding slowly. "Yes." "Do you know her?" A slow, chilling smile touched the corners of Leo's mouth. It was the kind of smile a predator makes when the prey unwittingly steps onto a hidden trap. He knew Cleo Abernathy. More importantly, he knew her wealthy aristocratic fiancé, Bradley Harrington. Bradley was a high-rolling, degenerate gambler who currently owed the Moretti syndicate upwards of $3 million from illegal underground poker rings. Cleo had been funding her lavish lifestyle, her designer bags, and her glamorous influencer trips, using the money Bradley was desperately trying to hide from Leo's collectors. Karma, Leo thought, was a truly beautiful, violent mistress. "I know of her," Leo said smoothly, leaning back against the plush leather. "And it appears the universe has brought us together for a very specific reason, Carolyn." Carolyn looked at him, bewildered. "What do you mean?" "I mean that nobody disrespects someone under my protection," Leo stated, his tone shifting into absolute authority. "And as of tonight, you are under my protection." He tapped the glass partition dividing them from the driver. "Change of plans, Marco. Take us to the estate." "Wait, what?" Carolyn panicked, her eyes widening. "Your estate? I can't go to your house. I don't even know you. You broke a man's phone with one hand and told him you'd feed his fingers to dogs. Who are you?" Leo chuckled, a deep, rich sound that briefly eased the tension in the car. "My name is Leonardo Moretti. I am a businessman, and while my methods of negotiation are sometimes aggressive, I give you my word as a man of honor. You will not be harmed." "But why are you helping me?" she asked, clutching her purse tightly to her chest. "Look at me. I'm not a supermodel. I'm not someone a guy like you rescues. I'm just the fat sister." Leo reached over and gently caught her chin between his index finger and thumb, forcing her to hold his gaze. "Never speak of yourself that way in my presence again," he commanded, his voice dropping an octave, raw and intensely genuine. "Society has warped your mind. I do not care for starving, hollow women who chase internet fame. I see a woman with a beautiful, generous heart, who possesses more natural beauty in her tear-stained eyes than your sister has in her entire fabricated life. You are magnificent. Believe it." Carolyn's breath hitched. No man had ever spoken to her like that. The sincerity in his dark eyes stripped away her defenses. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a punchline. She felt cherished. The Bentley passed through imposing, wrought-iron gates, pulling up to a sprawling stone mansion overlooking the dark waters of Lake Michigan. Armed guards nodded as the car approached, proving exactly how serious Leo's business was. As they walked into the grand foyer, complete with marble floors and sweeping staircases, Leo turned to his men. Roberta, I want you to locate Bradley Harrington and bring him to the warehouse. Tell him his debt is being called in early. And Marco, get our tech team to scrub that live stream off the internet entirely. Threaten the server hosts if you must. I want no trace of it by dawn. Yes, boss, the men chorused, disappearing into the shadows of the mansion. Leo turned back to Carolyn, his expression softening as he looked at her standing nervously in his massive hallway. Have you eaten? Carolyn shook her head. No, I wasn't allowed. A muscle feathered in Leo's jaw as he suppressed his rage at the memory of the salad. Come. My chef has gone home for the evening, but I am quite capable in the kitchen. Tonight, you will eat a real meal. You will drink good wine. And tomorrow, Carolyn Abernathy. We are going to teach your sister the true meaning of humiliation. Carolyn followed him toward the sprawling gourmet kitchen, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. She had walked into Laura, expecting a nightmare, but as she watched the most dangerous man in the city tie an apron over his bespoke trousers just to cook her a meal, she realized the night had birthed something far more profound. The internet thought they had witnessed the destruction of Carolyn Abernathy, but in reality, they had just awoken a monster who would burn the world down to keep her safe. And Cleo's perfect, curated life was directly in the crosshairs. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the palatial guest suite, casting a warm, golden glow over the massive California king bed. Carolyn stirred, the high-thread count silk sheets pooling around her waist. For a brief, blissful second, she forgot the horrors of the previous night. Then the memories rushed back. The mocking smile on Jason's face, the camera lens, the crushing humiliation in the restaurant. She sat up with a gasp, her hand flying to her chest. Panic seized her throat. The internet. She had to check the internet. She scrambled out of bed, ignoring the plush silk robe draped over the armchair, and frantically searched for her purse. Finding her phone buried inside, she braced herself for the barrage of hateful messages, the viral memes, the destruction of her quiet life. With trembling fingers, she unlocked the screen. She opened Instagram. Nothing. She checked Twitter, searching her name, her sister's name, and the hateful hashtag Jason had mentioned. 0 results found. Carolyn blinked, her mind struggling to process the blank screens. She checked YouTube, Reddit, and obscure gossip forums. There was absolutely no trace of the live stream. It was as if the humiliating dinner at Laura had never happened. I told you they were efficient, a deep, resonant voice called out from the open doorway. Carolyn spun around. Leo stood leaning against the doorframe, holding 2 steaming porcelain cups of espresso. He had traded his 3-piece suit for a casual black cashmere sweater that hugged his broad shoulders and dark tailored trousers. He looked devastatingly relaxed, yet his dark eyes remained incredibly sharp. It's gone, Carolyn whispered, staring at her phone in disbelief. All of it. Even Cleo's promotional posts from yesterday leading up to the stream. How is this possible? Leo walked into the room, handing her one of the cups. The rich, dark scent of the espresso grounded her. My tech division is highly specialized. They isolated the servers hosting your sister's private channel, dismantled the firewalls, and executed a complete wipe. Furthermore, a few persuasive phone calls were made to the executives at the social media platforms. They understood it was in their best interest to ensure the algorithm suppressed any re-uploads. He took a slow sip of his coffee. You are scrubbed, Carolyn. You are safe. Tears of pure, profound relief welled in her eyes. I don't know how I can ever repay you for this. You've saved my life. I told you last night, you owe me nothing, Leo said softly, his gaze dropping to her bare shoulders before respectfully snapping back to her eyes. But we have unfinished business. Come downstairs. My chef has prepared breakfast, and we need to discuss Bradley Harrington. 30 minutes later, Carolyn sat at a massive mahogany dining table overlooking the estate's sprawling, manicured gardens. A spread of fresh fruit, warm pastries, and perfectly poached eggs sat before her. But her appetite was secondary to the information Leo was dealing out like a deck of lethal cards. Your twin sister's brand is built on the illusion of limitless wealth, Leo explained, resting his elbows on the table and tenting his fingers. The penthouse, the designer wardrobes, the first-class flights to Dubai and Paris. She portrays Bradley as a brilliant venture capitalist who spoils her. The reality is quite different. Carolyn frowned, buttering a piece of toast. I always knew Bradley was arrogant, but Cleo swore his trust fund was impenetrable. His trust fund dried up 3 years ago, Leo corrected smoothly. Bradley has a severe gambling addiction. He frequents high-stakes, underground poker tables that my syndicate oversees. Over the past 24 months, he has accumulated a staggering debt. $3.2 million to be exact. He has been dodging my collectors for weeks, using the last of his borrowed credit to keep Cleo completely blind to his impending bankruptcy. Carolyn stopped eating, her hazel eyes widening in shock. $3 million? Oh my God. Cleo has no idea. None, Leo confirmed. She thinks she is untouchable. She thinks she can use you as a stepping stone to boost her engagement metrics, because she believes her pedestal is made of solid marble. It is not, Carolyn. It is made of rotting wood. And I hold the match. Carolyn looked down at her hands. For 26 years, she had allowed Cleo to dictate her worth. She had absorbed the passive-aggressive comments about her weight, the backhanded compliments, and the blatant disrespect because she believed Cleo was somehow superior. Cleo had the looks society valued, the money, the man, the success. But it was all a fragile, pathetic lie. What are you going to do? Carolyn asked, her voice steadying. She realized with a sudden surge of adrenaline that she wasn't afraid of the answer. Leo smiled, a dark, dangerous expression that sent a shiver down her spine. That depends entirely on you, Mia Bella. I can handle this quietly. I can ruin Bradley financially, force them out of the city, and ensure Cleo never has the resources to hurt you again. Or, he paused, leaning closer, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made the air in the room feel heavy. Or we can make an example of them. We can strip away the filters, the money, and the arrogance, and expose them to the very audience Cleo worships. I will not push you, Carolyn. If you want peace, you shall have it. But if you want justice, I will hand it to you on a silver platter. Carolyn closed her eyes. She thought about the cruelty in the restaurant. She thought about Jason's hand bruising her wrist, and Cleo's pinned comment mocking her pain. They hadn't just tried to embarrass her. They had tried to break her spirit for profit. When she opened her eyes, the gentle, accommodating accountant was gone. I want justice, Carolyn said firmly. I want her to feel exactly what I felt last night. I want her to look in the mirror and realize she has absolutely nothing. Leo's smile widened into something fiercely proud. He stood up and offered her his hand. Then let us go to work. Roberto has already secured Bradley. He is waiting for us at the warehouse. Miles away, in a sprawling, glass-walled penthouse overlooking the city skyline, Cleo Abernathy was having a spectacular meltdown. She paced furiously across the white marble floors of her living room, her silk robe billowing behind her. Her perfectly manicured fingers practically stabbed the screen of her phone. "What do you mean the channel is gone?" Cleo shrieked into the receiver, her usually melodious influencer voice cracking into a shrill panic. On the other end of the line, her manager sounded equally terrified. "I don't know, Cleo. The servers are totally wiped. The hosting company is saying there was a catastrophic hardware failure. Not only is last night's stream gone, but your entire subscriber database has been corrupted. We've lost the emails, the billing info, everything." "Fix it!" Cleo screamed, hurling a decorative velvet pillow across the room. "Last night was pure gold. The engagement was off the charts. People love a train wreck, and Carolyn was playing the pathetic fat girl perfectly. Jason was a genius. We were supposed to clip it for TikTok today." "Cleo, you need to listen to me," her manager interrupted, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "It's worse than just the channel. I got a call from Lumiere Cosmetics an hour ago. They're pulling your sponsorship." Cleo stopped dead in her tracks, the color draining from her flawless, contoured face. "What?" "Why, my contract with them is worth $100 grand. They wouldn't say." The rep just sounded scared. He mumbled something about a conflict of interest and hung up. And they aren't the only ones. Aura Fitness and Bella Vida have both sent termination emails this morning. Someone is blacklisting you, Cleo. Hard and fought. "That's impossible," Cleo whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was internet royalty. She was untouchable. "Where is Bradley? He needs to call his lawyers. He knows people. Find your fiancé, Cleo, because right now your brand is bleeding out." The manager hung up. Cleo threw her phone onto the plush white sofa and ran her hands through her blonde hair. "Bradley!" she screamed toward the master bedroom. "Brad, wake up!" But the penthouse was empty. Bradley Harrington hadn't come home last night. At that exact moment, Bradley was experiencing a reality far removed from luxury penthouses and silk sheets. He was currently tied to a heavy metal chair in the center of a damp, freezing, abandoned shipping warehouse on the industrial edge of the city. A single harsh halogen bulb swung overhead, casting long, sinister shadows against the concrete walls. Bradley's designer suit was ruined, stained with dirt and sweat. He was trembling so violently, the chair rattled against the floor. Standing in the shadows just beyond the ring of light was Roberto, casually tossing a heavy metal wrench from hand to hand. The rhythmic clink, clink of the metal was driving Bradley to the brink of insanity. "Please," Bradley sobbed. His nose bloodied from when Roberto's men had unceremoniously shoved him into the back of a van outside a high-stakes poker room at 3 a.m. "I can get the money. Just give me another week. My trust fund." "Your trust fund is a myth, Bradley." A smooth, chilling voice echoed through the cavernous space. Heavy, deliberate footsteps approached as Leo Moretti walked into the circle of light. He was flanked by Carolyn, who walked with a newfound, rigid posture. She wore a sleek black trench coat Leo had provided, her hair pulled back into an elegant knot. She looked commanding, entirely untouched by the trauma Cleo had tried to inflict upon her. Bradley squinted through his swollen eye, confusion mixing with his terror. "Carolyn? What are you doing here? Who are these people?" Leo stepped casually in front of Bradley, looking down at the sniveling man with profound disgust. "Allow me to introduce myself. I am Leonardo Moretti, the man you currently owe $3,250,000. And the woman standing beside me, whom you so casually address, is under my absolute protection." Bradley's jaw dropped. The name Moretti hit him like a physical blow. He knew exactly who held his markers, but he had never met the boss in person. To see him standing next to Cleo's quiet, introverted twin sister broke his brain. "Mr. Moretti," Bradley choked out, tears mixing with the blood on his face. "I swear to God, I have a massive deal closing. Cleo has a new cosmetics line launching. She makes millions." "Your fiancé," Leo interrupted, his voice cutting through the damp air like a razor, "currently has 0 sponsors. My men systematically dismantled her income streams this morning. She is, as of this hour, entirely broke, which leaves us with a severe problem regarding your debt." Bradley began to hyperventilate, thrashing against the heavy zip ties binding his wrists to the chair arms. "No, no, no. Please, I'll do anything. I'll work it off. I'll sell the penthouse. Just don't kill me. Please, I'm begging you." Carolyn watched the man who constantly mocked her weight behind her back completely break down into a pathetic, weeping mess. The contrast between Bradley's fake bravado on Instagram and this sniveling reality was startling. She felt no pity. Leo leaned down, resting his hands on his knees so he was eye level with the terrified gambler. "I do not want your penthouse, Bradley. I want your complete, undeniable obedience. If you do exactly as I instruct tonight, your debt will be forgiven in its entirety. You will walk away with your life, though entirely penniless. If you deviate from my plan by a single syllable, Roberto will ensure you never walk anywhere again." Roberto stepped forward, the metal wrench snapping solidly into his massive palm. Bradley nodded frantically, his blonde hair plastered to his sweaty forehead. "Anything. I swear, anything. What do you want me to do?" Leo reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a burner phone, pressing a sequence of numbers before holding it up to Bradley's face. "You are going to call your beautiful fiancée," Leo instructed, a dangerous, dark amusement dancing in his obsidian eyes. "You are going to tell her that you have secured a massive private investment to save her brand. You will tell her to wear her finest dress and meet you tonight at the private dining room of Laura for a celebratory dinner." Bradley swallowed hard, his eyes darting between Leo and Carolyn. He finally realized what was happening. This wasn't just about money. This was an execution of Cleo's social standing. He was being used as the bait. "And if she asks where I've been," Bradley whispered, "tell her you are securing her future." Carolyn stepped forward, her voice surprisingly steady, echoing in the cold warehouse. "Tell her she's going to be the star of the show tonight, just like she always wanted." Bradley looked at Carolyn, really looked at her for the first time in years, and saw the cold, unyielding iron in her hazel eyes. He gave a trembling nod. Leo hit the call button and pressed the phone to Bradley's ear. The trap was set. Karma was no longer just a concept. It was a dinner reservation, and Cleo Abernathy was about to be served a feast of total ruin. Twilight descended upon the glittering skyline of the city, painting the clouds in bruised shades of violet and deep amber. Inside her penthouse, Cleo Abernathy was blissfully ignorant of the storm gathering around her. She stood before her massive vanity mirror, applying a final coat of cherry-red lipstick, admiring her reflection with absolute adoration. She wore a backless $10,000 Valentino gown that clung to her size 2 frame like a second skin. Despite the catastrophic morning, losing her channel, the sudden dropping of her sponsorships, and her manager's panicked rambling, Bradley's phone call had single-handedly resurrected her ego. A private investor, a massive bailout. It made perfect sense to her. Of course, someone wanted to invest in the Cleo Abernathy brand. She was a gold mine. She was an icon. The minor setback with her sponsors was merely a hiccup, easily replaced by whoever Bradley was introducing her to tonight. She slipped her feet into Christian Louboutin stilettos, grabbed her diamond-encrusted clutch, and took the private elevator down to the waiting town car. When Cleo arrived at Laura, the atmosphere was noticeably different from the previous night. The main dining room was entirely empty. The chairs were pushed in, the lights were dimmed, and a singular "closed for private event" sign hung on the heavy brass doors. The usually haughty maitre d' was sweating profusely, his hands trembling as he unlocked the door for her. He didn't meet her eyes, merely gesturing toward the hallway leading to the exclusive VIP dining rooms in the back. "Bradley reserved the entire restaurant?" Cleo asked, a smug, triumphant smile spreading across her perfectly contoured face. "He really does know how to apologize for leaving me hanging this morning." The maitre d' swallowed hard but remained silent, fleeing back toward the kitchen the moment she stepped past him. Cleo adjusted her posture, perfected her most charming, camera-ready smile, and pushed open the heavy oak doors of the VIP suite. "Darling, I'm here. I hope your investors are ready to be dazzled by—" The words died in her throat, choking her. The VIP room was a masterclass in suffocating tension. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn tight. Seated around the massive mahogany table were not wealthy venture capitalists in crisp suits. At the far end sat Bradley, but he looked entirely unrecognizable. His face was a patchwork of purple bruises, his lip was split, and his expensive tailored suit was stained with dirt and sweat. He was shivering violently, his eyes darting to Cleo with a mixture of profound terror and desperate apology. To his right sat Jason Caldwell. The arrogant finance bro from the night before was slumped in his chair, pale as a ghost, nursing a heavily bandaged right hand and weeping silently into a linen napkin. But it was the head of the table that completely paralyzed Cleo. Sitting in the plush leather armchair, exuding the dark, terrifying aura of an apex predator, was Leonardo Moretti. He was dressed impeccably in a midnight blue suit, casually swirling a glass of Barolo wine, and sitting directly beside him, looking radiant, commanding, and absolutely untouchable in a custom-tailored burgundy evening gown, was Carolyn. Cleo's pristine facade cracked. Her eyes darted wildly around the room. "What is this? Carolyn, what the hell are you doing here? Bradley! What happened to your face? Who are these people?" "Take a seat, Cleo," Carolyn said. Her voice was unrecognizable. It held none of the timid, apologetic waver that Cleo was used to. It was smooth, hard, and laced with absolute authority. "I am not sitting down!" Cleo screeched, her pitch elevating to an alto, shrill tone. "Bradley, get up! We are leaving! I don't know what kind of sick joke this is, but I will not be a part of it." She turned on her expensive heels, reaching for the heavy brass door handle. Before her fingers could brush the metal, the door clicked, locking from the outside. Roberto, a mountain of a man who looked like he chewed gravel for breakfast, stepped out from the shadows near the entrance, crossing his massive arms over his chest. "The lady suggested you take a seat," Roberto rumbled, his deep voice vibrating through the floorboards. "I strongly recommend you listen." Cleo stumbled backward, genuine fear finally piercing her veil of arrogance. She slowly walked to the only empty chair, located directly across from her twin sister, and sank into it. Leo took a slow sip of his wine, his dark eyes fixed on Cleo with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Leonardo Moretti. You do not know my face, Cleo, but you are intimately acquainted with my money. Cleo blinked, her mind racing to connect the dots. I don't know what you're talking about. I make my own money. I'm an influencer. Leo let out a low, chilling chuckle. You were an influencer. Until this morning. You see, your fiancé here has a rather unfortunate habit of betting on the wrong poker hands. Over the last 2 years, he has accumulated a debt of over $3 million to my syndicate. That penthouse you live in, the designer gowns, the first-class tickets, they were not funded by Bradley's mythical trust fund. They were funded by stolen credit, leveraged against the money he owes me. Cleo snapped her head toward Bradley, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the armrests. Bradley, tell me he's lying. Tell me right now. Bradley couldn't even look at her. He stared at his trembling hands, tears spilling over his bruised cheeks. I'm sorry, Cleo. I'm so sorry. I lost it all. We have nothing. You pathetic loser, Cleo screamed, lunging forward, but Roberto placed a heavy hand on her shoulder, forcing her brutally back into her seat. Enough, Leo commanded, his voice barely above a whisper, yet it silenced the room instantly. You do not get to be outraged, Cleo. You are a parasite who has fed on the suffering of the only person in this world who genuinely cared for you. Leo reached across the table, gently taking Carolyn's hand in his. He kissed her knuckles, a gesture of profound respect that made Cleo's eyes widen in disbelief. You thought it was amusing to humiliate my woman, Leo continued, his voice dropping into a deadly, freezing register. You thought you could throw her to the wolves for a few thousand likes on the internet. But you miscalculated. You threw her into my arms. And in doing so, you sealed your own absolute destruction. Cleo stared at the intertwined hands of her overweight, pathetic sister, and the breathtakingly handsome, terrifyingly powerful billionaire mafia boss. Jealousy, hot and venomous, flared in her chest. Your woman, Cleo spat, trying to salvage any scrap of superiority. Carolyn, you have to be kidding me. Look at her. She's fat. She's a joke. I set her up with Jason because that's exactly what she deserves. I'm the beautiful twin. I'm the one who gets the luxury lifestyle. Carolyn didn't flinch. She didn't cry. The old Carolyn would have shattered into a million pieces at those words, but sitting beside Leo, shielded by his unwavering belief in her, she realized something profound. Cleo wasn't beautiful. Underneath the expensive makeup and the designer dress, Cleo was entirely hollow, rotting from the inside out. You're right, Cleo, Carolyn said calmly, leaning forward. We share the same face. But when I look at you right now, all I see is something incredibly ugly. You built your entire life on a foundation of lies and cruelty. You need an audience to validate your existence because without them, you are absolutely nothing. Cleo sneered. And what are you? A mobster's charity case. You think he actually wants you? He's using you to get to Bradley. Leo's eyes darkened ominously. He snapped his fingers. Immediately, Roberto walked over to the heavy velvet curtains behind Cleo and yanked them open. Behind the curtains, an elaborate array of professional broadcasting equipment was set up. High-definition cameras on tripods, ring lights, and a massive flat-screen monitor that was currently split into 2 feeds. One side showed a crystal-clear, live, multi-angle view of the VIP room, focused squarely on Cleo's terrified, sneering face. The other side showed a rapidly scrolling chat box. At the top of the monitor, a number was ticking upward at an impossible speed. 3.2 million viewers. Cleo's breath hitched. She recognized the interface. It was her public Instagram account. "What is this?" Cleo gasped, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "You love the internet so much," Leo said smoothly, leaning back in his chair. "You love performing for your audience, so I had my tech team restore your main account. They sent out a mass push notification to your 3 million followers, alerting them to an exclusive, unscripted live confession. We went live the moment you walked through those doors." Cleo's face drained of every ounce of color. The realization hit her with the force of a freight train. They had heard everything. Her millions of followers, the gossip blogs, the remaining brand sponsors, the high society peers she worshipped. They had heard Leo expose her fake wealth. They had heard Bradley confess to gambling away millions of syndicate money. And worst of all, they had heard Cleo viciously, unapologetically insult her own sister, revealing her true, hideous personality to the world. She turned her panicked gaze to the monitor. The chat was a blur of absolute outrage. User Cosmopolitan Queen. "OMG, she is totally broke. Her whole life is a lie." User Fit Life. "Danny, I can't believe she set up her own sister like that. What a monster." User Brand Rep _Lumiere. "We are officially drafting a public statement distancing ourselves from Ms. Abernathy." User Gossip Hound. "Wait, did she just admit to dating a mob-indebted gambler for his fake money? This is wild. Cancelled." "Turn it off," Cleo shrieked, lunging from her chair toward the cameras. But Roberto easily intercepted her, pushing her back into her seat like she weighed nothing. "Turn it off right now. You're ruining my life. You're destroying my brand." "Your brand was an illusion," Carolyn said softly, the finality in her voice ringing loud and clear over the microphone feed. "Your life was a lie. You wanted to make me a joke, Cleo? Congratulations. Now the entire world is laughing at you." Jason Caldwell, still sobbing quietly in his chair, tried to cover his face from the camera lens. His career in finance was over. No hedge fund would ever hire a man caught on a live stream associating with underground mob debts and public humiliation tactics. Leo stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. He looked down at Cleo, his expression entirely devoid of mercy. "The stream will end in 60 seconds, Leo announced to the room, though his words were broadcast to the millions watching. "Bradley. Cleo. You have exactly 24 hours to vacate the penthouse and leave this city. If you ever attempt to contact Carolyn again, if you ever utter her name in public, or if my men ever see your faces within the city limits, I will not be as forgiving as I am tonight. Your debts are forgiven, Bradley, but your lives here are permanently over." Leo turned to the camera operators and gave a sharp nod. The red recording lights blinked off. The screens went black. The silence that followed was deafening. Cleo slumped in her chair, her face buried in her hands. Her carefully curated empire reduced to absolute ashes in less than 10 minutes. She had nothing. No money, no fiancé, no followers, and absolutely no dignity. Carolyn stood up, smoothing the skirts of her beautiful gown. She looked at her twin sister one last time. There was no anger left in her heart, only profound pity. She turned away, slipping her hand effortlessly into Leo's. "Are you ready to go home, Mia Regina?" Leo asked softly, his eyes warming the moment they landed on her. "Yes," Carolyn smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in 26 years. "Take me home, Leo." 6 months later, the city had completely forgotten about Cleo Abernathy. She and Bradley had fled to a small, miserable town in the Midwest, working minimum wage jobs just to afford rent in a run-down apartment, their toxic relationship slowly poisoning them both. Jason Caldwell had been fired, blacklisted from the financial sector, and was currently managing a fast food franchise. But Carolyn Abernathy had blossomed into an empire of her own. The afternoon sun poured into the massive, elegant storefront of Abernathy Confections, an upscale, high-end bakery and patisserie located in the heart of the city's wealthiest district. Carolyn stood behind the glass display cases, wiping flour from her apron, laughing as she handed a complimentary truffle to a regular customer. She was no longer hiding her body. She wore bright, vibrant colors, her curves celebrated by custom-made vintage dresses that perfectly complemented her radiant confidence. The bell above the bakery door chimed, and the temperature in the room seemed to shift. Leo walked in, flanked discreetly by his men who waited outside on the sidewalk. He looked terrifyingly handsome in a bespoke black suit, drawing the stares of every woman in the shop, but his eyes were fixed solely on the beautiful, curvy woman behind the counter. Carolyn's face lit up. She handed her apron to her assistant manager and walked around the counter, practically flying into Leo's open arms. He caught her effortlessly, spinning her around and pressing a deep, passionate kiss to her lips, entirely indifferent to the audience. "You're early," Carolyn whispered against his mouth, a blush rising to her cheeks. "I missed my wife," Leo murmured, setting her down but keeping his hands firmly wrapped around her waist. He glanced at the diamond wedding band glittering on her left hand, a matching pair to his own. "And the yacht is fueled and waiting. 2 weeks in the Amalfi Coast. Just you, me, and enough pasta to feed an army." Carolyn laughed, a bright, musical sound that filled the bakery. She looked around at the legitimate, thriving business she had built with Leo's backing, and then up into the dark, loving eyes of the most dangerous man in the city. She had walked into a trap meant to destroy her, but instead, she had found her crown. She was no longer the fat, tragic joke of the Abernathy family. She was Carolyn Moretti, and she had never felt more beautiful. Conclusion. Did you love this story of ultimate revenge, deep romance, and sweet karma? Sometimes the greatest love stories begin in the most unexpected and chaotic ways, and watching a bully get exactly what they deserve is the most satisfying feeling in the world. If Carolyn and Leo's journey from a cruel prank to a powerful mafia empire captivated you, please hit that like button. Share this video with your friends who love a good karma comeback, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, dramatic, and romantic stories. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload.